Hello student, today I am going to discuss a chapter tissue. It is a chapter of class 9 science and it is chapter number 6. So let me start with the basics. So from the last chapter we have learned that all living organisms are made up of cells, and we have also learned that the cell performs all the basic functions. Now let me explain this part. In the last chapter we have already learned that all living organisms, either it is a unicellular or a multicellular, both are made up of cells. The difference lies in the fact that unicellular organisms are made up of single cell and multicellular organisms are made up of more than one cell, that is millions and millions of cells. So the unicellular organism is composed of single cell, and the single cell is responsible for all the function that the unicellular organism performs. So since unicellular organism is made up of one cell, so that one cell is responsible for all the function that the unicellular organism is performing, right from engulfing the food to excreting out the waste material from its body. On the other hand, multicellular organisms have millions of cells to carry out the specialized functions of the body. So multicellular organisms, they have millions and millions of cells. So those millions of cells have divisions of labor. Divisions of labor means different cells have different works to perform. Some cell will be engaged in the respiration, some cells will engage in carrying the essential substances from one part of the body to another part of the body. Like that, some cells will be involved in the excretional processes. So for example, muscle cells contract and relaxes to cause movement. Nerve cell carry message, just blood flows to transport essential substances in our body. So in the previous slide we have already learned that multicellular organism is made up of millions of cells. Now what is that millions of cell called? That million of cell or that group of cell is called a tissue. So what is a tissue? A tissue is a group of cells that are similar in structure and work together to achieve a particular function. A tissue is a group of cells, that is a group of cells combines to form a tissue, and that particular tissue or the cell which is making up a tissue are similar in structure, and whatever number of cells are present in a tissue, they work together to perform a particular function. So carrying out my further explanation, so tissues are of two types. So that means we are going to discuss about the two types of tissue in this chapter. The first one will be the plant tissue and the second one will be the animal tissue. So plant tissue. Plant tissues are categorized into two categories. Number one, meristematic tissue, and number two, permanent tissue. So as you can see in the picture, plant tissue, it is divided into two categories, meristematic tissue and permanent tissue. Meristematic tissue is categorized into three more categories. So before going into those three categories, let us discuss what is the meaning of this meristematic tissue. Meristematic tissue is also known as growth tissue. Cells composing the meristematic tissue show lifetime cell division. Cell division throughout its lifetime. So depending on the region where they are present, meristematic tissues are classified into three categories: apical, lateral and intercalary. So meristematic tissue, it is also known as growth tissue. You can also call it a growth tissue. So the cells which are comprising the meristematic tissue shows lifetime cell division. That is, the cell which is present in the meristematic tissue that divides throughout its lifetime. So meristematic tissues are divided into three categories: apical, lateral and intercalary. So this apical, lateral and intercalary, the names are different because of the different regions where the meristematic tissues are present. So first one is the apical meristem. So it is present at the growing tip of the stem and roots. It increases the length of the stem and roots. So apical meristem, where is the apical meristem present? It is present at the growing tip of the stems and roots. It increases, what is the function of it? It increases the length of the stem and roots. The next one is intercalary meristem. Now this intercalary meristem, these are located at the internodes or at the base of the leaves. So what is the meaning of this internode? These two portions, you can just see it in the figure. There are three leaves. I've just shown the three leaves in this figure. Now the portion of between the two leaves, it is known as internode. And which one is called the node? The basal part of the leaf, the part of the leaf which is attached to this particular portion. You can just see this portion is called as the node. You can just find, you are just seeing it in the figure itself, the node. The representation of the node, you can just see it in the figure, and the portion between the two nodes is called as the internode. So the intercalary meristem, it is present in between the two nodes. And what is the work of the internode? What is the work of the intercalary meristem? The intercalary meristem helps in increasing the length of the internode. To increase the length of the internode, the intercalary meristem comes into action. Now the next part is the lateral meristem. The lateral meristems are present on the lateral sides of the stem and root of a plant. That means on the sides, the meristem which is present is called as lateral meristem. What is the function of the lateral meristem? The lateral meristem helps in increasing the thickness of the plant. Increasing the thickness of the plant means increasing the diameter of the plant. So proceeding to the next part. Next comes permanent tissue. We have already discussed about the meristematic tissue. Now we will discuss about the permanent tissue. So let us start with the definition of permanent tissue. The tissue that are completely grown and has lost the ability of division are known as permanent tissue. That means the cell comprising the permanent tissue, they do not show cell division throughout its lifetime. They show cell division for a limited time, and after that they lose the ability of cell division. So the tissue that are completely grown and has lost the ability of division are known as permanent tissue. The meristematic tissue divide and differentiate to form permanent tissue. That means the permanent tissue, where from do they arise? This permanent tissue arises from the meristematic tissue. So there are two types of permanent tissue. Number one, simple permanent tissue, and number two, complex permanent tissue. So there are two types of permanent tissue. There is simple permanent tissue and complex permanent tissue. So let us just discuss about the simple permanent tissue. The simple permanent tissues are of 5 types: Parenchyma, Chlorinechyma, Parenchyma, Chlorinechyma and Sclerenchyma. So let us discuss about each of them in detail. So Parenchyma, these tissues are responsible for photosynthesis, storage of food, gaseous exchange and floating of plant. They are a group of living cells with cell wall made of cellulose. So parenchymatous tissue, these tissues are responsible for photosynthesis, storage of food, gaseous exchange and floating of plant. Their cells have cell walls, and those cell walls are made up of cellulose. The parenchyma cells have large intercellular spaces between them. The parenchymatous cells, they have large intercellular spaces between them. There are thin walls that surround each cell. The cell walls, they are thin, and they are found in leaves and newly formed branches. So where are they found? They are found in the leaves and they are found in the newly formed branches. The next one is Chlorinechyma. These tissues are responsible for providing flexibility to the plants so that they can bend easily. I hope you can understand this line. The next one, they are a group of living cells with cell wall made up of cellulose and pectin. Their cell wall is made up of cellulose and pectin. They have little intercellular spaces between them as compared to parenchyma. They have less intercellular spaces. Now, if you are having confusion in understanding intercellular spaces mean the spaces between the two cells. Now, the cells present in this tissue are broad and irregularly thick at corners. That means they do not have a regular size. That means the cells present in these tissues, these are broad and they are irregularly thickened at corners. Next one, they are present in the leaves and stem of plant. Where will you find this Chlorinechyma? You will find this Chlorinechyma in the leaves and the stem of a plant. The next one is Sclerenchyma. Now, these tissues are responsible for making plant hard and rigid. Now, this sclerenchymatous tissue, what are they responsible for? They are responsible for making the plant hard and making the plant rigid. Next one, they are made up of dead cells. The sclerenchymatous tissue, they are mainly composed of dead cells, and the cell wall is made up of lining. Lining is a chemical substance. The cell do not have any intercellular spaces. That means there is no intercellular spaces between the cells present in sclerenchyma. The cells have a long structure with thick walls. The sclerenchyma, whatever cells are present in the sclerenchyma, they are composed of thick walls. They are found in stems, in the veins of the leaves, and covering the nuts and seeds. An example of the sclerenchymatous tissue which you can see is the husk of coconut, the outer covering of coconut. It is also composed of sclerenchymatous tissue only. The next comes Chlorenchyma. Now these tissues are similar to that of parenchyma, but they also contain chlorophyll in them. These tissues are very similar to parenchyma, but what is the difference? What is the thing which is making its name completely different from parenchyma is the presence of chlorophyll in these tissues. Parenchyma, they do not contain chlorophyll, but Chlorenchyma, they contains chlorophyll. So due to the presence of chlorophyll, now as you already know, chlorophyll, this is an essential pigment which performs photosynthesis. Now if these cells which is composing the Chlorenchyma, if these cells contain chlorophyll, that means they will also be able to perform photosynthesis. As it is written in this part, due to the presence of chlorophyll, they are capable of performing the process of photosynthesis in plant. So Chlorenchyma, it helps in performing photosynthesis in plant. So next, in this sclerenchymatous tissue, we heard of a substance called lining. So what is the meaning of lining? The cell wall of dead cells have a substance called lining in them which provides rigidity to cell. Lining acts as a cement for the cell. So lining is a chemical substance which provides rigidity to the cells. In other words, if I say what is lining, it acts like a cement for the cells. That means it helps in reducing the intercellular spaces. The next comes epidermis. What is the meaning of epidermis? It is the outermost layer of cell. So the outermost layer of cell is known as epidermis. This epidermis covers the entire plant. That means the entire aerial part of the plant is covered with epidermis. It is a thin layer of single cell, but in places with less water, the epidermis of the plant can become thick in order to avoid frequent water loss. So epidermis in the terrestrial plant, that means in those places where there is abundance of water, or where there is where there is abundance of water, in all those places, whatever plants are there, their epidermis are thin. But in the places where there is scarcity of water, that is in the desert regions, whatever plants are there, their epidermal layer is thick. Why is the epidermal layer thick? To avoid frequent water loss. Now the cells of epidermis are flat and they have no intercellular spaces between them. The main function of the epidermis is to protect the plant from fungi, water loss and injuries by secreting a wax like water resistant substance called cuticle on the surface of the plant which protects the plant. So what is the function of the epidermis? The function of the epidermis is to protect the plant from fungi, from water loss and from other infections. Then next comes stomata. What is a stomata? Stomata are pore-like substance that are present in the epidermis of the leaves. These pores are enclosed by two cells that have a similar shape as kidney. These are called guard cells of stomata. Guard cells are modified epidermal cells. So stomata, it contains guard cells which ensures that there is no unnecessary water loss from the plant body. Now the stomata. What is the work of the stomata? The work of the stomata, that is, it helps the plant in exchange of gases and in transpiration. So what is the thing which is present in stomata which is helping the plant in that manner? It is the guard cell. So guard cells are responsible for the exchange of gases and transpiration. So in my next class I am going to discuss about transpiration. Then I am going to discuss about the next part of permanent tissue, that is complex permanent tissue.